Really nerve-wracking. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 6 of Creative Corner. I'm your host, Max. For those of you that don't know what Creative Corner is, or you're tuning in for the first time, Creative Corner aims to bridge a gap between leaving a place of study, whether that be college, university, or any type of education, and the gap between that and landing a job within the creative industry, or whether that be for freelance, whether that be under an agency, or anything else that comes under creativeness. Each week I'm going to have a new guest on. We're going to talk about their stories, tips and tricks, where they started, where they are now. And my guest this week is someone who I've worked with for probably like a little over a month now, is Sophie. So Sophie, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, okay, I'm Sophie. I'm 24. I graduated last year from Birmingham City University. I did media and communications, and currently I'm an illustrator for Aspire for You, doing some social media content creation for Little Helper Kate, and dabbling a little bit in Life Proof and On Point with some job opportunities. And that's about it at the minute. And I run a Facebook page as well with all my work on. Forgot to mention that.
Let's delve into that a little bit deeper then, because obviously what me and you are working on now are sort of similar projects, sort of different projects. We sort of collaborate with each other a little bit with feedback and that sort of thing in weekly meetings that Life Proof do. So if you just want to discuss sort of where you started in your creative career, was it something that you always wanted to go into? Was it something that you just fell into accidentally and was just like, okay, let's just get this ball rolling? So versus where you started versus where you are now, can you explain that story for us?
So I started doing A-levels in psychology and sociology, and I thought I was going to go off to uni and do that. And I think I was about 15. So I skipped a year of school, basically. So I was 15 doing my A-levels. And that I was like, what's the word called? Like, I got blinkers on, like, that is what I was going to do at uni. And I was at a family barbecue, and somebody brought a DSLR camera along. And they let me have a play with it, and I was like, whoa, like, this is a whole new, like, thing. Like, I just didn't know these things existed. So I started having a play, and I left that barbecue that night, and I said to my mum and dad, like, I want one of them. And they were like, like, you've got to go off and, like, study it. Like, you've got to learn how to use it. So as I said, I did these A-levels, realised very quickly that was not what I wanted to do. And I started again at 17, went off to college and did an A-level in photography and an A-level in media. And I ended up getting a place at BCU to go and study media and communications. And I absolutely loved every minute of it. I knew straight away that's what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So I started with photography, built up through like the 5 years of college and uni, and ended up being a graphic designer / illustrator. So I sort of fell into like illustration. I didn't really realise that was what I was going to do in the end, but it was something I tried. It's something that I absolutely love, and now I'd say that's the main thing I do. I've still got a camera, I still do a bit of photography, but illustration is what I enjoy the most. And I sort of fell into that a little bit. Like, I never realised that I could do graphic design. So kind of half planned it, half fell into it, I suppose.
And then from studying and landing this volunteer role at Aspire for You, how did that happen?
So basically lockdown, that's how it happened. So I left uni and I was going to become a supervisor for a well-known restaurant, and I realised again I'm not very good at that. So I left, went to work for another well-known company, and got put on furlough in March after being.
You can say the company name, by the way. It doesn't matter.
Okay, I went to work for Greggs.
Okay, there you go.
So
there needs to be like a level of realism here, because if people say, "Oh, I went to go work in a high chain supermarket," they instantly think Waitrose, but like, or like something like that, and like that's not what we're here for. No, it's not. We want this level of like. We're all humans, we all make mistakes, we all like have shitty jobs in shitty places, and that's okay.
So I went off and got a job at Greggs last December. Stayed there until furlough in March, and I was furloughed for 7 whole months. I didn't go back to work. And the first month or two was great, just watching telly, playing The Sims on my laptop. It was great. I was like, I'm going to go back next week. It's fine. May comes round. I still haven't gone back to work. And I was like, I've got to start doing something productive with my time. So I set up a Facebook page and I started posting more on the Instagram that I'd already created at uni. And I got a few people messaging me about a certain portrait I did, like the first one I did. And they were like, can you do one for me? I was like, all right then. So I did one for somebody. Then another person asked. And then, like, my mum said to me then, like, so many people are asking, you need to start charging for this. So I charge like a £5 here, a £10 here, like nothing.
Yeah, right, depending on.
Yeah, like how long it took. And as I was doing it more, I was getting better. And I was doing, like, just vector illustrations of, like, portraits of people. And the more I did them, the easier they became and the more I enjoyed them. So I just started posting more. And then I set up like all this branding for my page. So it turned it into a little mini business, just something to keep me going. And then Kit found me on, I don't know how he found me on Facebook, because he found me on my personal Facebook, and like I've got this Facebook page that hasn't got my name, like my full name or anything on there. And he found me, and turns out somebody that I still don't know who it was had tagged me on a page as a graphic designer. And Kit just dropped me a message, asked to see some of my work. So I sent it off to Aspire for You. 2-3 weeks later, they invite me to a meeting and they're like, do you want to, get involved, do a bit here and there? And that's it, really. That's how I got into it, just Facebook.
Yeah, I think as well, like 7 months of lockdown, as one comes across and just like, what you're doing is great. Do you want to do it for a company, actually help people out and that sort of thing? Yeah. And I think for that opportunity to come up, especially in lockdown, is like, I will take it, because right now there's literally nothing else going. And if I'm putting my time, if like my now spare time into something new, then why the hell not, right?
Yeah, that's what I thought. Like, I needed to get out as well of that industry of like fast food and restaurants, because I have not got the personality for it. Like, and I just haven't got, my anxiety just doesn't deal like with working in that sort of industry. And I quickly realised that it was good to get me through uni, but this is not something I can do for the rest of my life. And I've gone to university for a reason. And I think a lot of my time after uni I spent being lazy. I didn't do anything. Like, I'd got all these skills and I'd learned how to be a photographer and how to illustrate. And, there's like, I'd learned how to write as well. And I wasn't using any of these skills. I was just going off to work at Greg's. And I will admit a lot of it was laziness, because I didn't know. I didn't want to do it. Like, I think I'd had enough after leaving uni, and that's not a good thing to say, but it was, uni is what it is and it's hard. But I think after having that little break and realizing that there was somebody out there that actually wanted me to do work for them, that's what got me going again. That's what sparked it for me. Because otherwise I think I'd have just carried on in these dead-end jobs and just probably ended up being a manager at Greg's. And who wants that for themselves?
Yeah. It's weird, isn't it? A sort of, you go from studying and then you go to, like, let's say you do go to uni, and that's 3 years of your life, and that's 3 years of your life actually doing stuff as well. You're learning, you're going out, you're meeting people, you're going to different places that you've never been before, you're trying different things, you're exploring different styles, you're exploring history, there's lots of things that are happening among those 3 years. And then when it comes to an end, you're like, what now?
What do I do? Like, you've had direction with everything.
That comes for probably all of students that have finished university and just been like, okay, so what's now?
I think
and
that
is probably gone through that lull of I don't know what's next, but like, and maybe it is laziness, maybe it's just, I'm the money that I'm earning in my part-time job is enough to get me by for my means that I'm living by right now.
Like, as well, leaving uni, like, even at 24, I'm still in that mindset that I just need enough money to get me through my nights out and get me dressed. And I was just loving spending, like, giving my mum a little bit of board and then spending the rest on just either getting drunk or buying clothes. And I think as well, look, I didn't really think about the bigger picture. And I didn't think like, eventually I'm going to want to buy a house. I'm going to want to, you know, start a family and things. And I can't do that without, you know, it was sort of like, if I didn't do something with that degree, then what was the point in doing it as well? Yeah. That was what spurred me on in the end, was those 3 years, that 50, 60,000 pound debt is just going to go to waste. And what was the point? So definitely spurred me on, and having something like Aspire for You approach me definitely gave me like that little boost to, you know, it was sort of like somebody had approached me and actually liked what I did for once. Like, I think I always felt like I was doing like this illustration work just for myself, and like no one was really noticing it. And then when somebody like Kit did approach me, it's like, this is good, like this is what we need. I'm like, somebody actually needs me. Like,
it seems surreal, doesn't it? Because I was discovered in a similar way. That it was just, I don't know if it was Kit, somebody messaged me from the main Instagram and was like, hey, really like what you're doing here. You know, do you want to come into our office and just have a quick chat about, you know, what we do, and maybe you can get involved. And I was like, holy shit, like, yeah, let's go for it. And that sort of then happened after just like a day of just me and Kit just having a conversation with each other, and then me following him around. And then 1 week later, I was in the office doing work for them. It's sort of like an odd thing, because what I've discovered, and I think what my guests discovered about being on this podcast, is when they decide to look back at how they got to this certain point of their lives or point of their career, they didn't realize the steps they were taking at the time. In terms of when they actually like explain it through, they're like, it still doesn't make sense, but at that time it sort of was, everything was just falling into place. Everything just sort of happened. And one of the big things that I've discovered as well is that like most creatives right now we're all just making it up as we go along and hoping for the best sort of thing. And
I'm glad someone else said that.
It's a really sad reality of being a creative person, because it's like, especially if you're a freelancer as well, because if you're a freelancer, you're not really knowing where that next bit of money is coming from in order for you to pay rent and, you know, pay for your Spotify subscription every month or whatever it is. It's really odd. Something that I picked up from the base story that you told us is that barbecue with a DSLR camera. So what was that like? Because obviously you said that you had the blinkers on. That sort of like, that's what you wanted to do. You wanted to go into psychology. You wanted to, you know, that was the route you were going to go down. And then all of a sudden you were exposed to this other side of, you were exposed to
a piece of equipment.
And this piece of equipment, this, you know, 400, 300 pound camera in your hands, and you're like, okay, so, you know, how do I make this work? Like, what was that like for you, discovering something else for the first time, and what were the triggers then that like led forward?
So I think at the time, I just remember sitting there and seeing, like, it was a family friend, I didn't know the person, and I said to my mum, I was like, look at that camera, like, oh my god, like 15-year-old me had never seen anything like it. Like, and my mum said, why don't you go and ask her, go and have a play? So I got talking to her, and she told me that she wasn't professional or anything, she was just doing it for a hobby. She said, have a go, you know. So I just went around this garden. There was like a couple of kids playing. Somebody had just had a baby. She wanted some photographs taken. So we were just playing around, you know, taking pictures of everyone else at the party. And I was like, talking to her about this camera, I was like, it's so good. Like, I could just remember at the time, couldn't get over it. And I was like, I want one so bad. And I remember, like, I think I might have been about 16. So like a year later, I was still at sixth form. And we were going on holiday, and my dad had bought me a digital camera, like the little diddy one. And it was better than nothing. And I remember like going around playing with it, and I was just blown away. And I said to my mum and dad from that minute then, like, once I got my own little camera, I was like, this is something I want to do. And I remember having a conversation with my dad, though. We were sat in the car, and he said, like, you're never going to make money off being a photographer. Like, it's just not going to happen. It's not something that happens. Like, you've got to either be really good at it, or you've got to go into, like, you know, like product photography and stuff. So fine.
Sorry.
So yeah, I just remember at that minute like being really disheartened. I was like, I'm never gonna do it. Went home, spoke to my mum. Mum was like, if you want to do it, go and find a college course. I'll go with you to the interview, but you've got to go and study it. We're not buying you a camera until you go and actually learn how to use one. So I did. I went and found a course at Hazone College, and I spent 3 years at Hazone College. And I think that was it. Then I think I knew from I was about 17 when I started. I knew then, you know, that was what I wanted to do, and it was really weird. I think all my life I'd grown up thinking that to be a creative, you'd have to be an artist, or you'd have to be able to draw or paint or something. It never occurred to me until that point that there were other forms of creativity. And that was a really weird feeling to know that I was classed as an artist at that point. That was a really weird moment for me when I realised that photography was art, and, you know, like eventually digital design and photo manipulation, all that's art. And I was like, I'm an artist. Oh, get me. And yeah, that was a really weird moment for me. And going off to uni and obviously then going off and doing the same things, really, I mean, right now, this minute, to say that I'm a creative person, that like I create art, that is still really weird to me now, just as weird as it was nearly 10 years ago.
It's a weird level of imposter syndrome, isn't it? Because you're like, it was when people ask you like, "Oh, so what do you do?" and you're like, "Oh, I'm a graphic designer or an illustrator." And it feels weird to say that. Yeah,
like I never really thought growing up that I'd ever be able to do it, because I've got like a family member who's like really, really good at drawing. And I remember like about 5 years ago, like I was at college at that point in my last year, and looking at her work and then looking at what I do, and I was like, I'm never going to be that good. And now I've learned how to do, you know, not exactly what she does. She's still better than me. You know, she's amazing. But it's really weird to know that I'm doing the same thing that she does. I've learned it. I've gone off and I've put all my all into it, and I've come out doing something that I actually love, and never realised in my life that I would love it. So yeah, really weird sensation.
She's a bit of an inspiration to you then, in terms of...
Oh God, yeah, she is. She's real inspiration. She's amazing. I remember like my sister runs a cupcake business,
right?
And back like when I was just discovering photography, like going off to college, I used to help out with the business. And I remember I said to my mum, we need a logo, and we asked this family member for a logo. And I just remember looking at it and thinking like, whoa, like this girl, she's about 3 years younger than me. I just remember going, she's going to go places. Like, she's just on it. She's amazing. And yeah, I would say she's a bit of an inspiration. It really is.
Yeah. So, what about anybody else? Like, is there any artists you look up to or anything like that? Is it like all like friends and family that have inspired you to be who you are?
I would say it's a lot of my family and friends that have inspired me. I look up to artists, but not in terms of like they inspire me to be what, you know, like it's not their life story it's their work that inspires me. Like I really like Willie Doherty, the photographer. I studied him at college and then went on to uni and did a massive report on him. And his work is quite dark. It's like a lot of black and white. It's set in Ireland, I think it's Northern Ireland. And a lot of his work's based around the Troubles. And it's really dark and gloomy, but I love it. I don't know why.
Yeah.
And I mean, you look at my work now and you'd think, God, do you really like are you sure? Like, but I do, like, when I pick up my camera, like my go-to sort of photography is landscape photography. So I would go out and walk the streets and I'd just go and try and find, you know, a good shot just walking around my estate, which I have done many times. And I think that's where my photography inspiration comes from. But like, in terms of who inspires me to carry on and to do it, it's going to be my mum and my sister and my boyfriend, because they're constantly like telling me like, oh my God, you're amazing. And like, I don't feel it. And I really don't. But, you know, they're the ones that keep me going, because they say, like, you've done so well so far just to even land this position with Aspire for You. Like, to say a year ago, I hadn't even picked up my camera since I'd left uni, to now where like I'm spending 6 to 12 hours a day sat doing something I love. You know, that just them telling me how far I've come, like reminding me how far I've come, that's what inspires me to carry on, I think.
Yeah, I think especially for me as a creative, and I've also have friends that I've spoken to this about as well, about like having a purpose to wake up and actually do the things that you want to do. It doesn't, there's always that famous quote, isn't there, of you know, find a job you love and you'll never work a day in your life, sort of thing.
That's how I feel.
It sounds really cliche, but it is true. And having friends and family around you that actually say, what you've done here is really good, keep doing this. Okay, maybe you need to work on this to improve on that. And if you improve on that, this in turn will then do this. It sort of helps you. And it's like, as much as you sort of, like, when I get feedback, I sort of not hate to hear it, but sort of like, because it creates friction.
Yeah.
And I'm okay, I know it's annoying that I need to change it, but I know that when I change it, it'll be better. So, you know,
I'm exactly like that.
Bit of like practical thinking for you of like, I know what I need to do in order to improve, and I know what I need to do to get better. And we're going to make mistakes, and that's okay.
That is exactly like, I'm exactly like you in terms of getting the feedback. Is like, I look at something and I'm thinking, I'm happy with that, I don't want to change it, and then I go and present it to like you and Jenna, for example, or my mom or my boyfriend, and they're like, I need to change that, that's not right. And I'm like, I was really happy with that, actually.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I didn't want to hear that, I want you to say that's amazing.
A second and third pair of eyes always help that that situation. Like when I was this week, when I was designing a leaflet for one of the projects that we're doing, I sent it to my friends Zach and Ross, and they were like, yeah, this just needs to change. And I was like, oh no, here we go.
Do you know who the worst is for that, though?
I was like, okay, but by going through those motions and going through that process, you know, 2.5 hours later, I was like, holy shit, okay, it's good now, it's fine.
Yeah.
You know, we were worrying about like 2 hours ago, and it's all like all that stress and that weight that you feel that you have is just gone.
Yeah.
And it's a great feeling to know that you've have people around you to actually help that, and B, that you know the processes and know those different things on how you can make them better. And third, you can go a step further and say, okay, these are the mistakes that I made, and this is what I'm going to work on for next time. Or maybe I'm going to do a passion project that bases on typography or the use of imagery and text at the same time. You know, you sort of create different things for yourselves, because if you want to get better, practicing is the only real way to do that. You know, practice makes perfect. So, yeah. You said a little bit about how in lockdown there was like a level of laziness, didn't really want to do anything.
That was before lockdown.
Oh, wasn't it?
that was as soon as I left uni.
Yeah, so as soon as you left uni, right? Did that come with creative block, or is that something entirely different? Is that to do with mental health, or is it like you just felt bogged down because you didn't want to do anything creatively? Like, what is that process like? And creative block for you, what is that like for you as well?
I know exactly what it was when I left uni. It was mental health. And I don't want to lie to anyone about university. It is a massive toll on your mental health. And I remember the feeling in that final year of being like, if you don't do this, and God, don't anyone going to uni, do not think like this. It's the most damaging thing. Do not ever think what I like how I did. So I was in my third year and I was thinking, if you don't do that dissertation, you're never going to have a mortgage, you're never going to have a family, you're never going to have a car, you're never going to have anything you want. And
self-esteem does.
Yeah, I talked myself out. In the end, I talked myself out of even bothering with the dissertation. It's like, well, you're never going to get a mortgage anyway, so what's the point? So don't ever do that to yourself. Don't ever think like that. It's the most damaging thing I've ever done to myself, because I just remember I ended up crying to my tutor about it all, and she was like, why are you even thinking about that? That's years away, and the dissertation is in 2 weeks. So, but I knew at that point that when I left uni, I put that camera down and I didn't pick it up again until the following February. So I graduated. I put my camera down in May, It was almost a year later, I didn't touch anything. I didn't even touch Photoshop for another year. And I think it was because of that little voice in my head in that third year that was telling me, you're never going to get a house, never going to get a car, blah, blah, blah. I think it had ended up convincing me that I hated it. I hated, you know, all photography, everything. I hated the lot. And I didn't. I never did. I've never hated it. But I think I'd somehow got it into my head that, you know, that was it now. Like, you've done your 3 years, now go and find something else to do. And that was probably the worst thing I've ever done to myself. I know it was all me. It was anxiety. And I think it was anxiety of not feeling good enough as well. And yeah, that was a really dark place for me, a dark point in my life, thinking that I was never going to pick up a camera again, never going to do anything creative again. And for a start, I didn't know how to get creative. I just didn't know what to do to get creative again. I just didn't know, like, where do I start? Do I go out and do a photo shoot? And it always got to a point like where I'd have a day off from work and like, you could do something today. You could draw a picture. You could do anything. You know what to do. And I think half of it was like the fact that I didn't feel good enough, and the other half was just pure laziness.
Right.
And it wasn't until that following February, where somebody actually asked me to take some photographs of them. So a friend wanted some like modelling shots done. Right. And my boyfriend just said, like, you've got to do it. You've got to get back out there and start.
Sure. Right.
So I did. I went out, and I just remember like that following weekend after the shoot, and I'm not editing the photographs in Photoshop, and I just turned to my boyfriend like this, and I'm like, why did I ever stop doing it? Like, this is what I want to do. And yeah, again, laziness took over. I didn't pick up a camera again until like May, and then that was when I realised then that I think it's when I found illustration and started teaching myself again. I had to relearn it almost. Obviously, being away from it for a whole year and not bothering, I had to sort of relearn it and teach myself Illustrator, which I've always had a love-hate relationship with. But yeah, it was just that moment when I relearned it. I was like, actually, I found something I really enjoy, and I'm going to hold on to that, and I'm going to keep doing it until I get bored of it. And so far, I've not got bored of it, and that was May. So is that 6 months, 7 months?
Yeah. And
I've not stopped. I think it's when you find, like, you will. I think that's the thing. Like, when you leave uni, you might fall into what I fell into, that little, you know, like, I don't want to do it anymore. I hate it. But just keep searching for something. There is going to have been something you did in those 3 years that you remember loving. And there will be a time when you pick it up again and you realise how much you love it. Just don't stop doing it then, because it does get, like you said earlier, it gives me a purpose to get up in the morning. It gives me something to get out of bed for. Like, and like, again, I don't feel at the moment like I'm working ever. Like, I'm sitting at my laptop and doing these posts for Kate, Little Helper Kate, or I'm doing illustrations for something here or there. And I'll look at the clock and I'll start at 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock like comes round. I'm like, oh my God, I've been working. Like, it doesn't feel.
It doesn't feel like it.
Like time just goes. And
my friend Ross, he's a huge hard worker, and he's like, there was one project that he was working on that just involved a logo for a company before it was extrapolated onto a brand. And him and his boss were sort of like discussing the idea and sort of like processes around like logo design and sort of like how to know which logo is going to be the best to suit this brand that they were doing for. And I was talking about it, and at the time that we had this discussion, he wasn't set on anything that he'd found yet. But in terms of the discussion that they had, he's like, I really know what I love about design, and it's the process of knowing what the problem is and knowing how to solve it in the most simplest and most efficient way. And it's like every creative that I've ever spoke to has had just one thing, and it's oddly specific to what they really love. And me as a creative, I don't think I've found that yet, and I'm not worried, obviously, because it's going to come to everybody at some point. It's like true love, like that will come to everybody at some point.
Yeah.
It's like, so hearing those little stories, I'm like, oh shit, like that's awesome. You know, I'm on for like the finer details. I really love like, you know, why decide to tell me about that certain bit, or like why, like what was it about that story that made it for you? You know, why decide to tell me that story? It's just really, really inspiring to me to hear from other creatives, friends, you know, about what they find really interesting, and it's sort of like their view on life, and it's almost like that you're getting like a little glimpse into what their life is like. And for me, that's, oh shit, like you see me and you see the world very differently, but we're still friends, and that's okay, you know. Or me and you have these similar levels in which we line upon. And then when it goes to like anything else, maybe like whether it's down to the food we eat, whether it's down to the clothes we wear, you know, whatever it might be down to, we all could be completely different. But then we share that one little bit that could be so valuable for like a friendship or for whatever it might be. So yeah, I think it's really interesting to hear different people's stories from that, and I think Creative Corner is a place for people to do that as well. We've spoken a lot about your backstory, you know, getting back into it a little bit. We've got a little bit about creative block as well, and getting into. You had like a little bit of a flow state when you said that you like, you know, working for like 6 hours straight and not really realizing. Is it?
Yeah.
Is there a way that you not necessarily force yourself into that? Is there a way that you can aid like getting into understanding the work you're doing and just being in that flow of doing work and getting stuff done? Do you have music on in the background, or do you just literally just sit there and just know what you've got to do? Do you have a checklist? You know, what's that process like for you?
So my process, so at the minute, it changes day to day, depending on what task I'm doing. Okay. I've got like a master to-do list. So at the minute, it's like chock-a-block with like social media posts, blog posts. I've got to, as I said, I'm doing little helper Kate stuff, and like we're setting that up. So like I've got my master to-do list with all that. But like the night before, so say I'm going to be working tomorrow morning, like I'm going to do it tonight basically. As I get into bed, I sit in bed, I put the telly on, I get my laptop out, and I write out everything I want to do tomorrow. So whether that be like simply just editing like 3 blog posts before 1 o'clock or whatever I want to do. And I do try and set times to get it done by like little deadlines, because I do find that in any aspect of my life, as long as I do a to-do list and set a deadline, even if I don't finish every task on that list, it's going to spur me on to get things done faster. So it doesn't work for everyone, but for me that works, having little deadlines throughout the day. So I do my to-do list the night before, and then I think when I start work, I've got to always have a cup of coffee and my earphones. I put my earphones in and I just sit and I don't know, like I just sit, put my earphones in and check my to-do list, and then I think I start with like the easiest thing first.
Right.
And I probably shouldn't do that, because actually Kit said something really interesting to me last week, where you're going to start the day with the most brain power, like you're going to be raring to go. So use that brain power to do the really hard tasks, and then when you run out of steam, do those little easy tasks. And that actually made sense to me. So no matter, like they always tell you to start with something easy, but really, like if you're in that zone, and like I get into that zone very early on, like the first thing I've got the brain power straight away. But I always seem to do that thing where I start with the easy tasks and it comes to the hard tasks later, and I'm like, oh God, here we go. I've got to do like this massive illustration I've got to do, or whatever it is. So yeah, I now start with what Kit says, is to pick up that really hard task, get it done out the way, and then spend the rest of the day doing something like tedious. So like scheduling posts, I tend to do that later on around 5-6 o'clock. But I get the bulk done first. And having a to-do list and my earphones in really helps. Not any particular genre of music. So I used to try and listen to classical actually when I'm reading.
Really?
Yeah, tried. And that guy that was on Britain's Got Talent, Toby something, he was a pianist.
His name, sorry.
I just remember her having really nice hair, and he was a pianist. And I listened to him, especially during uni. But then Didn't really work. Like I still got distracted.
Okay. Yeah.
But I do definitely, like, I've got a habit, and you've probably noticed this because I like talking. I've got a habit of talking to people if they're around me. So I have to literally force myself to put these earphones in, and I look at Kit,
you're a social bee. That's fine. That's all right.
I have to look at whoever I'm with and be like, I'm putting my earphones in. Don't talk to me because I will answer. Just don't talk.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my day to day. Yeah, definitely having music helps. And if I'm at home, I've got my little speaker. I don't watch telly, because if I watch telly, I won't get my work done.
Actually, the idea of being distracted, like Netflix is always just waiting for you to be like, "Hey, I've got a new series out," and you're like, "Oh, okay."
I wanted to get all this work done today. It's like 6 hours later, and I'm watching like a true crime documentary on Netflix. I'm like, how did I get to this point?
Avoid, and you just get sucked into it. It's interesting about the whole. Do you do the easiest thing first? Do you do the most difficult thing first? Because there's I think there's a book called how to be a millionaire. Step one is to make your bed every day, or something like that. Because that's the idea of. I've really fumbled that quote, so please don't quote me on that. But essentially, the idea is you start with something simple in order for the idea to get the ball rolling and to keep moving, and then that builds momentum, and then you do the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And then versus your now new method of approaching that situation is doing the hardest thing first. One of the most time consuming perhaps, or something that is going to acquire a bit of brain power. It might be a problem to solve. It might be mathematics. It might be whatever. Maybe you've got to write something for a certain audience, or whatever that task is going to be. It's quite interesting how you've gone from sort of start with easiest and then work your way up to the harder thing.
And I also think
reverse that.
I also think though as well, if you keep putting off that big task, you're never going to do it. It's
right.
If you don't get it done and out of the way, like this is something I was always told growing up, like with my homework, get it done when the date's set.
Yeah.
And you haven't got to worry about it. And I think what Kit said to me the other day really made sense. And I related it back to that thing my parents said to me growing up, is if you get it done when you've got the brain power, like, when like at uni, when you came out of a lecture and you're on your way home and you're like, oh, my brain's like going now, like I need to go home and do my assignment. And like no one ever did it, but like how wonderful would it have been if like we had that mentality like when we were at uni? Because I've really found, especially like since Kit said it to me last week, and I've started doing that where I pick up that really bulky task first, that towards the end of the day, when all that's left is to literally just put things in the scheduler, or just send emails off, or just simple like a little illustration or something really small. It's like, oh, I can relax it. And it also helps me wind down like from a day of work, because I realized that when I started like doing more work for Aspire for You, and I was working like 6 hours a day, I was realizing I was getting home and I couldn't wind down. I was going to sleep and I was not dreaming. I was thinking in my sleep about what the next social media post is going to be. Like, when am I going to get this blog post done? And I couldn't wind down whatsoever. And since I've started doing that thing where I get that really hard task done and I tick it off my to-do list, and then end the day with something a little bit, more simple, it really helps me wind down, and I'm more productive the following day, because then I'm not awake all night thinking about the task I've got to do next.
I think the amount of times, especially in university, occasionally it happened at least once a year, where I'd have like a semester in the not a semester, a lecture in the evening. So it would start at like 6 and go on, and then finish just after 9 o'clock. Now, if you're already doing stuff in the day and knowing that you've got to go to a 3-hour lecture at 6 that finishes until 9, my energy's pretty gone by then. But there was always like, it would finish at 9, or it would finish earlier, like 8 o'clock or something like that. And then I'd get home and I'd be like, I need to still work on this because it's what's in my head right now. It's what's just going through. And there was one where it was a website design module, and it involved quite a bit of coding and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And there was one night where I got home, I'd eaten, and but like while I was on the way home, I was like, so how am I going to code it? How am I going to, how is it going to look? Is it going to work? It was a big undertaking to actually get the actual project started. And I was like, let's just start it and see what happens. And then I got like the base of it, like the actual like skeleton of this website built within that evening. It didn't take me like that long, but like just the idea, because the idea was in my head, I was like, I need to get this done. I need to. Because it was just, otherwise it was just going to fester in there, and I probably wouldn't be able to sleep otherwise. I'm one of these people that wants to get ahead, knowing I can sleep sound, knowing that something's done, rather than having to worry about it the next day.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I've started doing now, is realizing that if you get it done as early as possible, get that. Like at the minute, my head is like bursting with ideas for the social media stuff I'm doing. And I've got to get it out. Like the other day when we were in a meeting on Thursday, and I was still working on these posts while we were on the meeting, because I just couldn't. I had to get them out. I'm exactly like you. Once I get the idea in my head, it's got to come out. It's got to go onto that screen.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's going to be lost at the back of my mind forever. And yeah, I definitely feel like you said, getting it done as soon as it's set, you're going to sleep better at night. And that is, that's the most valuable thing at the moment, is sleep. To me, anyway. So yeah, and I'd definitely recommend that to anyone at uni. Like, get everything done. Don't stay up till 5 o'clock in the morning doing assignments like me.
Right. Yeah.
Every semester I did that.
I mean, pull that every so often, because then people can realize that that's definitely not what to do. Like, I think you need to realize that it's not what to do, and that's like, you need to go to one extreme to know what you need to know where the moderation is between them. For sure.
Do you know what? Funny you say that, actually, though, because I made that mistake in the first year, and actually that I posted a status on Facebook in my first year of uni saying it's 2:45 in the morning and I've finished my last assignment. I've survived the first semester at uni.
Right.
And then like the following, or like the week before, it said something like, never stay up till 4 a.m. doing uni work, just don't do it. And the following year I did it again, and I shared the status going, did it again this year. And then the third year, so I never learnt from my mistakes.
Right.
So take it from somebody that did it every semester. Just don't do it to yourself. Just don't.
Yeah. Let's talk about that for a second, because like, did you feel pressured to do that work?
What, the uni work?
Yeah.
Yeah, like especially like, as I mentioned earlier, in third year, I was convincing myself that I was going to fail at life if I didn't do that work. So yeah, I felt massively under pressure. And also, like, another thing I want to mention is that I think for me, especially, I don't know if anyone else feels this way, but uni was always the goal for me. So just getting the degree was the goal. I never really gave much thought to what was after it. Like, I just wanted to go to uni and get a degree and then figure it out afterwards, if that makes sense. Like, not like I said, like, I mean, like, I never wanted to get a career, but like, I just never thought about what was going to come afterwards. So to me, getting those assignments in was like the biggest thing ever. Like, I had to finish it, because at the minute, the only thing that I've got is that degree. I've not got a career path planned out for myself. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do when it's finished, but I just know I need to get it.
Right.
And I felt I put myself under that pressure. Like, I didn't feel under pressure from the uni lecturers, because like at uni, no one cares. Like, if you don't do that assignment, they're like, well, it's your degree, not mine.
Yeah. This is the thing, isn't it? This is like one of the big things that I remember from university, especially in the induction week. There was a lot of introductory lecturers, and just like, here's how this university works. And I remember there was one, and this lecturer stood at the front and just says, like, if you're late, if you don't turn up to a lecture, that's your time you're wasting, not mine. At the end of the day, I still get paid, whether you turn up or not. And that sort of just set the bar for me. I was like, okay, right. I was going to turn up anyway. I'm a good student, but but for people that, and at uni, you are going to meet people that are not going to go to lectures because they don't think it's worth it, or like Sophie, for instance, or I'm going to turn up late, or rather, they would value the night out rather than going to, again, like I've had a few lectures where I've turned up with a massive hangover, but I still turned up because I was like, I know it's important.
Yeah, I think I'm sort of in between actually those two. So I really realised how important the lectures were, and I would show up to lectures no matter how hungover I was. But I also had a habit of sleeping through the 9 a.m.s, and to me, I could catch up later on the 9 a.m.s, like the 12 o'clocks and 3 o'clocks. They were fine, but 9 a.m.s at uni.
Right.
It's just like a nightmare, like a recurrent nightmare.
Yeah, it was horrible for a lot of people. I never had a Thursday morning lecture. They were always like Thursday afternoon. So I was like, and the social night was a Wednesday night in Worcester. So you'd go out on a Wednesday night, whether you were part of a social or not. People just went out on a Wednesday night because it was busier because all the socials were out. Drinks were cheaper. You could get into the main nightclub for either a cheaper price or for free if you got there early enough. It was just like, those were the huge nights. And then the next day, people would turn up to lectures, people would turn up hungover, and they're just like, but there would always be the type of conversation, wouldn't it? Like on the night out.
Yeah. Oh, God,
like,
yeah.
You got 9 a.m. tomorrow, you're pretty drunk right now. It's like, no, I'm good actually. So you just sort of like brush it off your shoulder, like water off a duck's back. And you're like, yeah, I've not got a lecture tomorrow, but you have. So you can.
Oh, that was the funniest because like I used to go out with people on my course. So all 3 years, my nights out were just people with a media course.
Yeah.
And it was funny because the course that I did, we all chose our own modules. So we didn't all have the same lecture times. And like my housemates, we'd all go on a night out. So like same with us, it was a Wednesday night or a Thursday night for our like the big nights out in Birmingham. And mainly a Thursday night, we'd all go out because it was free entry. And like half of the house would have a 9 a.m. and the other half, I can't remember. I think I had an afternoon. I think I might have had Fridays off. And I used to work. I used to be the one that had work at 6 a.m. and I'd go out every Thursday and show up to work every Friday. Just do a 3-hour shift. Literally, that's all I used to do was a 3-hour shift on a Friday. And I just like, because it's 3 hours, I can go on that night out. No one will. Yeah. Worst decision I ever made.
They really take a toll. They really take a toll on you. Anyway, bringing back to creativity a little bit.
Sorry about that.
It's fine. It's fine because this is also like, we speak a lot about university here. I went to university. A lot of my guests have been to university. There's a few people that didn't go, but there's like reasons why they didn't want to go to university and that sort of thing. So I think it's good to discuss like the pros and cons of going to university because it is a big decision to make. And it's probably one of the most adult decisions, or like one of the first adult decisions that you'll make. Like when I always do like choosing a university, mum and dad were like, whatever you choose, it's your choice. Like we're not going to make this choice for you because this is what you want to do, not what we want to do.
Yeah.
It teaches you that. We've spoken a lot about university experience. We've spoken about how you got into your creative side. So we can, about different experiences. So what would you say is your best experience that you've had, or the most valuable experience that you've had?
I think possibly running the SLB page so far has been a real eye-opener because I've started taking on like really decent sized clients. People have put a lot of trust in me. And I think for that first time in my life, knowing that someone trusts you to design a brand, for example, like I've took on a really big client recently and done logo and branding for them. And, other things as well, like the illustrations, people are ordering these for partners' birthday presents or something really special for them to keep. And they're putting all their trust in me. And that is it's a stark difference to just submitting an assignment at uni. Like I'm more motivated to do these than I was for the assignments at uni. Like, as I said, I put myself under pressure at uni, but that was just for me. And sort of in my head, it was, is it really worth it because it's just you? Whereas now doing SLB and this is for other people. This is their their portrait, their logo. And that's that experience of actually taking on people's like is it commissions and things. That is a very weird feeling, knowing that they're putting a lot of trust in me to get that right. And then, like, obviously afterwards, once you finish it and you send it off and they go, this is brilliant, this is just what we want, and they leave happy, that is one of the best feelings.
Customer satisfaction is
like
everything that I've ever worked in. I before university I had like a few hospitality jobs, and during university I worked at Pizza Express in Worcester. And when a customer left happy, or you were able to have a conversation with them about what you do, or they just really you made them have a good time, they left with a smile on their face. And that was really important, not only as to Pizza Express as a whole, but also like to me, because it was like, they're going to come back, it's going to, why would you want to leave a restaurant sad? You've just had some great food, you just had pizza makes the world go round pretty much, right? And even if I've done like occasional freelance stuff, or whether I've done client work for Aspire for You, it's always been, is the client happy? And if they are, then my job's fulfilled, because I've made them happy, I've done what they wanted. Granted, that process is going to come very differently for different people, because there might be a back and forth between what the client likes and what you like, and whether things are going to work on certain applications that they need to put it on, whether it needs to be on a billboard, whether it needs to be a social media post. So it's going to come very, very differently for each one. So I think and that for when a client, especially more so for design work, obviously, when they come back and say, this is great, you've done exactly what I've asked you to do. I'm really happy, and on a bonus, you're getting paid for it as well occasionally. And it's just like, I'm not saying that money is a factor, but money is a factor.
It is.
Even if you're not relying on it as much as other people might be, it's good to know that you're also not only just making them happy with the work that you've done, but you're able to live, you're able to, maybe have like an extra night out with your friends, because you're able to afford that sort of stuff. You're able to afford those experiences because you need money to live. Pretty much.
What, funny enough, what you said, I was talking to somebody yesterday, and I was telling them about what I do, basically having this same conversation. I was like, I work for this lady who did some cleaning and blah, blah, blah. And I said, like, at the minute, I'm voluntary, but I'm going to start getting paid. And as much as I'd love to carry on being a volunteer, because it's such a wonderful little company, it's the world doesn't run on kindness. And there's not enough time in the day for me to go and do a job, Monday to Friday in something I don't enjoy. And then after that, go and do commissions for your friend, and a phone case for somebody, and there's not enough time in the day to do it all. So, like, basically what I'm trying to say is, if you want those little luxuries that me and you create, we can't just do it out of kindness. It takes up a large portion of our day, and we haven't got time to just sit and do this work and then go and do a job and earn money. It's like, this is our job. And sometimes it's not just, I'm not just doing it because I love it, I'm doing it because it's a necessity in society. People, isn't there a saying that everything around us has been designed? And people, say that again, sorry.
Design is all around.
Design is all around. And yeah, that's the saying. And what we do is necessary. It's, as I said, like, I don't know where I'm going with this, but long story short, we are needed, and we can't just run on kindness. We're going to require something at the end of the day. So I don't know where I went with that. I was getting a bit like jumbled up, but I think you get the idea of what I was trying to say.
There's something in there somewhere, and and there's definitely a meaning there, and I understand what you're saying, at least. This is important to us, and if it wasn't important, we wouldn't be doing it. And if we wouldn't put our prices to where they are because we're making a laughing stock out of you.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was trying to say.
Yeah. So with that, I'm going to move on to the recommendation section of this podcast. It's not really a section; it's just like a little bit that I just tag in at the end. So we've spoken a lot about experiences and sort of how we've come over certain lazinesses and creative blocks and that sort of thing. And something that I think is quite apparent right now is that a lot of people don't really have a lot of hope for what's to come in the future. So my recommendation this week is a book called Everything is Fucked, which is a book about hope by Mark Manson. It goes into sort of like how to build hope, why people don't have hope, why people do have hope, and tells a few stories about certain people that have hope and why it has worked for them. There's a few things about procrastinating in there as well. I think it's been a while since I've read it. But yeah, great book. And Mark Manson is a very practical advice person. He also was the author for a book called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, which is about.
I've heard of that one.
Yeah, which is about not really caring what people think, but being aware that there are going to be other people around you, and that's going to be a process that you're going to have to go through, and how to know what is bullshit and what is not bullshit, and how you cultivate yourself to be a better person in order to not give a fuck about what the people that you don't like say and the people that you do like, and just those differences as well. So there's sort of like two recommendations there for you. But yeah, great book, bit of a laugh at points and jokes and that sort of thing. But I think a book like this needs to be a little bit on the informal side, shall we say. Sophie, I believe you've got something to share as well.
Yeah, so funnily enough, there was a certain YouTuber that sparked my creativity again.
Right.
And I can't not shout her out, recommend her. It's Alice Thorpe on YouTube. She does a website as well. She runs it, and there's tutorials on there on how to basically become an illustrator.
I know exactly who you're on about. That's crazy.
She's amazing, and honestly, if it wasn't for watching her YouTube videos and like going on her website and looking up her tutorials, I would not have relearned how to do vector illustration. She's amazing, and she's inspiring me right now. I'm spending 90% of my time looking at iPads because I want to learn how to use Procreate. Yeah. So, if you're a graphic designer or an illustrator, I would highly recommend going to check out some of her videos. She doesn't just do tutorials; she does like a day in the life video, recommendations on the best equipment to get. So yeah, I think she's fab, and she's from Nottingham, and I love her accent. So honestly, that is who got me back into it. To be honest, I think if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be here now. I wouldn't be doing this interview. No one would know who I am. No one would know what I do. So definitely.
Like one inspiration will go. Actually, I feel like picking up again because of them, and the person that you're inspired by has no idea, and it's like, do they know? Do they know that they're inspiring people today? Like they've inspired me, And I mentioned before that if I ever go into public speaking or anything like that, like my goal is, or I don't know if I've mentioned it on the podcast or I've mentioned it at some point in a meeting, perhaps. Yeah. Where it's like, if I tell a story about graphic design or minimalism or a passion of mine, and one person in that crowd or audience has either been open to the mindset change or has, considered them to either rethink about how they look at life a little bit differently, or encourage them to pick something back up again, or whatever it might be. If I've somehow altered that or changed that because of me in a positive way, of course, then I consider my job successful and done. That's just one person. Yeah. Because from that one person, strokes two people, strokes three people, and then so on and so forth. Yeah. So as a final two more questions, I think, for you, Sophie, before we end it today. How do you think the creative industry is going to change within the next few years? Because obviously we've seen a lot move from more of a physical format to now a digital format, hence why we're doing this. We're not in a studio, we're not in any sort of office recording this. We are literally in our bedrooms looking at our laptops, just talking to each other right now. So how do you think that the creative industry is going to change?
I honestly couldn't give you an answer to that. It's a very broad question, and I think it's changing as we speak. As you just said, we're in our bedrooms. We're not in an office. We're not, in a studio. And I think it's gonna. I'm hoping that it's not going to change too much, and we're going to go back to normal. I hope COVID doesn't change, what's going on too much. But like, funnily enough, this is going to go a little bit off, but I did my dissertation on creativity, and it was hugely inspired by the iPhone. So have you seen those advertisements that just say shot on iPhone?
Yeah.
I foresee that eventually things like photography, as a career, are just not going to be as sought after. That's one thing I really think.
Yeah,
these cameras are getting. I've had this like a debate before with some friends about how eventually cameras on phones are just going to become so good that there's just going to be no need for a DSLR. Like the technology, already look at some of the cameras on phones now.
Yeah.
And I think eventually, a lot of people are going to be able to do what I've spent years studying and practicing and perfecting. I think people are going to be able to do it with an iPhone or whatever phone they've got. And it's heartbreaking to think that.
Yeah, I think we are seeing that a little bit already with the release of every new phone. Like the latest iPhone has 3 or 4 cameras on it or whatever. The latest, I believe the latest Samsung had just like a slab of cameras.
Yeah.
There's
you're not paying for a phone anymore. You're paying for that camera.
You're paying for more than just a phone, right? There's a photographer that you should, if you're interested into looking at that a little bit more, called Adam Patrick Murray. And he is gifted phones a lot when they first come out, just to test their camera. And I think it was when the iPhone X came out, he did like a side by side of the latest, the iPhone X and the latest Samsung at the time, and like one of the Google phones as well, and just messed around with like exposure and that sort of thing, and didn't really edit them. He didn't edit them at all, and just uploaded the raw photographs to his Instagram, and just seeing like the level of detail in those, and seeing like that compared to what is a £600 camera, or potentially more expensive if you're in the photography business. Just interesting to see how close and how much detail that can shoot in, and it's like no bigger than just a few seconds, right?
But one thing I will say, sorry, carry on, finish what you were saying. Sorry.
No, I was done. Carry on.
So one thing I will say, and it fits in lovely with the title of this podcast, I'm pointing to the wrong side, is that creativity can't be taught. You're either born with it or you're not. And 99% of people are born with some form of creativity inside them. They just need the right tools to uncover them. And as much as I say as well, it's scary that I think eventually there's going to be a phone that does my job for me. I don't ever think that every single phone owner is going to be able to pull off the sort of work that we can do. I always think, maybe 10 years down the line, there won't be a need for DSLR cameras, but you're still going to have to go off to uni, or still going to somehow, spend 10 years practicing that art, because at the end of the day, creativity is not something that can be taught, but the skill is. And you need the skill. Not everyone. Some people are just fantastic without the skill. They can just do it. But me, for example, I had to go and practice and learn. I'm a prime example of that. And I think you're always going to need a professional, is what I'm saying. Professionals are always going to be needed. You can't just pick up a phone and take an amazing shot without knowing how to set the lighting, what's the best lighting to use, what's the best angle, and not everyone knows that. So there's always going to be some sort of space, but I do think it's going to change dramatically. So
I think, like you said, it is a very broad question, and I'm not really expecting anything specific. So like broad answers are honestly fine for that. So yeah, it's quite interesting to see. I mean, like we've spoken a lot about just photography, right? With the talk about AI and like phones being ridiculously powerful now in terms of cameras and what they can do and shoot, record, and like night filters and that sort of thing, so you can like shoot stars and stuff. It's very odd to think about, but also quite interesting as well, because it's like, what roles are humans going to have in that? And
I think there'll always be, as I said, you can't just teach creativity. You cannot just program. So, you can't be programmed creativity. No one can.
Plenty of thought in what we've just discussed there. Final question then, Sophie. And now this is it's one that I ask for all my guests. What is a piece of advice that you would give to someone that's trying to do what you do, or do something along the lines that you do? What's your advice to them? Do you advise them to go to university? Do you advise them, what is there? What could you tell your 18-year-old self?
If it feels right, do it. So if you want to go to uni and that's something you want to do, go and do it. Think about it first. Look at your courses, look at where you want to go. Because I was going to go off to Manchester, and I had to really think about that because I couldn't leave my mum. So think about it. But if it feels right, go and do it. So if you want to go to uni, do it. If you don't want to go to uni, that's fine. But personally, it was what benefited me the most. Also, one really big piece of advice to any graphic designer, photographer, anyone: get a light laptop. Don't get a heavy one. You're going to regret it. I've got a MacBook Pro. I love its pieces.
My most favourite piece of advice that anybody's ever given me is get a light laptop.
Get a light one. Like, seriously think about that. Because I walk from the train station to the office every day, and I've had to buy a whole new bag just to carry that laptop. So seriously consider how heavy your laptop's going to be, and don't think about it too much. Just if it feels right, do it.
That's right. All right.
Yeah. So
I really like that.
because if you don't want to go to uni, it's not for everyone. And some parts of me still wish maybe there was another way to get around this. Maybe I didn't need to go to uni. But I'll never know, because I did. And I'm here now. And it's not something I try to think about, is if I didn't go, where would I be? So, but honestly, if it feels right, do it. If it doesn't, don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Do not, don't let anyone influence your decision too heavily. Because if I'd listened to my parents, 10 years ago saying you'll never make money off being a photographer, I would probably be working at McDonald's still. So, that's my little bit of advice.
Awesome. And with that awesome little bit of advice about getting a laptop and if it feels right, do it. That is where I'm going to end this podcast. Now, for those of you that don't know, this podcast is hosted by LifeProof, which is at LifeProof UK across all the social medias. If you want to know about job opportunities, if you want to know about what's happening with Creative Corner or any of the other podcasts that we're doing, we do a lot of stuff based about youth violence, and we're trying to reach out to more young people as well to get their voices heard and get them involved in what we're trying to do here. So, Sophie, thank you very much for joining me today. Hope you've enjoyed it and speaking about your little career that you've got going on here.
I've loved it. I've loved every minute.
So with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching. Look after each other, stay safe, and we'll see you in the next one.